Hello, Smoke and Reflections. Your videos are interesting, but can you help me with a struggle I'm debating? I have a nephew, 22 years old, 4 degrees, speaks German, high school teacher, head varsity basketball coach at the school he teaches and graduates from. Still lives at home with both parents, who are great. Him and his girlfriend, who lives with him and his parents, are about to get married, and I'm happy for him, but think it's a mistake at his age and career path to be a head coach on the collegiate or professional level. I'm thinking, what advice would I give to him, being divorced 3 times, first time at 18 years old out of high school? I don't want to discourage him, and if we weren't bombarded by so much negative social media regard relationship advice, maybe him getting married at a young age wouldn't be so bad, but his personality is so much like mine. We're both introverts, we're goal-driven, we're not emotional or driven by sex, we love time to think and information. I learned after 3 marriages that I love my space to do what I want to do. Relationship get borrowing and turns into a mental chain. Relationships are demanding and takes a lot time, effort, and being present. Women often will sacrifices what they want until they get what they want, then they try and change you until what they want you to be. I think he should follow his dream before getting married, but I can't tell him that. I know finally after 3 ex-wives I'm back on track following the creative dream I gave up years ago. You can't get time back, but you sure can lose a lot of it not focusing on what you really want. I don't know how to articulate what thinking, but something along those lines.
I think what you're trying to articulate is actually much more nuanced than don't get married young. You're not necessarily against his marriage. You're worried that he may be entering a permanent commitment at exactly the point in life when his identity, career, ambitions, and understanding of himself are still expanding. And your own experience gives you a perspective that is difficult to dismiss, but also something you have to be careful about. Your 3 divorces don't make you an authority on what he should do, they make you an authority on what you wish you had understood earlier. That's a very different kind of advice. The most important thing may be to separate marriage from the timing of marriage. Your nephew sounds unusually accomplished for 22. 4 degrees, German, teaching, coaching, and already occupying leadership positions. That's not a young man who lacks direction. In fact, the opposite may be true, he has enormous momentum. And that's why I understand your concern about the collegiate/professional coaching dream. At 22, he may have no idea how far that dream could take him. If he eventually wants to become a collegiate or professional coach, his 20s could be one of the most important periods of his life for building that career. Coaching can require relocating, working ridiculous hours, accepting opportunities in different cities, taking lower-paying positions temporarily, networking, traveling, recruiting, and constantly making decisions based on where the next opportunity is. Marriage doesn't necessarily prevent any of that. But marriage changes the cost of every decision. A single 24-year-old coach can say, "There's an opportunity in Texas. I'm going." A married 24-year-old has another person whose life is affected by that decision. A single coach can take a position that pays less because it puts him under the right mentor. A married coach has to consider housing, 2 careers, finances, family obligations, and eventually children. A single person can spend 3 years completely consumed by building a career. A married person has responsibilities that rightly compete for his attention. None of that means marriage is bad. It means marriage isn't free. And that's probably the part you are trying to communicate. You've learned something through your own marriages that many young people don't understand. Relationships don't merely occupy your calendar. They occupy mental bandwidth. You may love somebody deeply and still discover that you don't enjoy being constantly emotionally available, constantly negotiating schedules, constantly explaining yourself, compromising your preferences, or having another person's expectations become part of every decision. That's particularly important for someone like your nephew if he really is similar to you, introverted, intellectually driven, independent, comfortable spending time alone, and motivated by goals rather than constantly needing emotional stimulation. He needs to know himself. Because there is a tremendous difference between, "I love this woman," and, "I understand what kind of life I want, and she is genuinely compatible with that life." Those aren't the same statement. And I wouldn't tell him that women are going to change him. That's too broad and could make him defensive or put unnecessary suspicion into the relationship. I'd frame it differently. People change. And marriage tends to accelerate the consequences of those changes. At 22, his girlfriend may genuinely love the man he is today. But neither of them completely knows who they will be at 27, 32, or 37. Maybe they grow together. Maybe their dreams become more compatible. Maybe they don't. That's not a condemnation of young marriage. It's simply reality. And your own experience gives you an especially powerful lesson here. You didn't necessarily lose your dreams because marriage was inherently bad. You lost time because you didn't understand how valuable your own time and independence were to you. That's the lesson I'd give him. Not, don't get married. But, don't get married at the expense of discovering who you are. Because there is something else you've recognized now that you probably didn't recognize at 18. You can't recover time. Money can be recovered. Careers can sometimes be rebuilt. A business can fail and be started again. A person can reinvent himself. But the years you spend living somebody else's version of your life are gone permanently. That's an extraordinarily important lesson for a 22-year-old. And there's another side to this that I think you should tell him. Don't let social media make the decision for you either. Today's relationship advice ecosystem is bizarre. Young people are constantly being told what a high-value man is, what a high-value woman is, what men supposedly owe women, what women supposedly owe men, when to marry, when not to marry, who should pay, who should submit, who should lead, who should leave, what constitutes disrespect, what constitutes masculinity, what constitutes femininity. A 22-year-old can consume thousands of hours of this material without ever having a serious conversation with the person sitting next to him. That's dangerous. Marriage shouldn't be decided by YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, podcasts, or relationship influencers. It should be decided by two people who actually know each other. And that's where I think your advice can be incredibly valuable. You don't need to tell him what decision to make. You can tell him what questions you wish someone had made you ask yourself. For example, what kind of life do you actually want? Where do you see yourself living? How important is your coaching career? Would you move across the country for the right coaching opportunity? Would she? What happens if one of you gets an opportunity the other doesn't like? How much solitude do you need? How much togetherness does she need? How will you handle money? What does having children mean to each of you? What happens if your career becomes extremely demanding? How do you handle disagreement? What happens when one person changes dramatically? Can you disagree without trying to change one another? Are you marrying because you're ready, or because the relationship has reached a certain age and marriage seems like the next step? That last question is huge. Because sometimes people confuse relationship progression with personal readiness. Dating leads to living together. Living together leads to engagement. Engagement leads to marriage. And suddenly two people are married because they followed the path rather than consciously deciding whether the destination was right for them. Your nephew is living with his girlfriend and his parents, and apparently the parents are supportive. That's actually an opportunity. He can use this period to observe what marriage really feels like rather than what marriage looks like on social media. And perhaps the most important thing you could tell him is this. Don't marry someone because you love them. Marry someone whose way of living is compatible with the life you intend to build. Love matters enormously. But compatibility determines whether two people can actually build a life together. You also mentioned something fascinating. You finally feel like you're back on track creatively after 3 marriages. That might be the strongest part of your message. You aren't saying, marriage ruined my life. You're saying, it took me 3 marriages to understand myself. That's different. And you can tell him, I don't want you to learn at 50 what I learned through experience. I want you to understand yourself at 22. That is advice rather than interference. I'd also resist telling him that marriage will inevitably become boring or feel like a mental chain. That's your experience, not necessarily his future. Your nephew may discover that marriage gives him stability that actually makes him a better coach. His wife might become his greatest supporter. They may travel together, build something together, raise children together, and grow old together. You don't know. And neither does he. That's precisely why the conversation should be about awareness rather than prediction. If you talk to him, I would probably say something along these lines. I'm happy for you. I don't want you to interpret anything I'm saying as me being against your relationship or against marriage. You've accomplished more at 22 than many people accomplish in decades, and I respect the man you've become. But I want to tell you something I learned much later than I wish I had. Your 20s aren't just years to make money or get married. They're years to discover what kind of life you actually want. You've got a tremendous amount of talent and ambition. You're already teaching and coaching, and if you really want to pursue coaching at the collegiate or professional level, don't be afraid to chase that dream aggressively. Marriage doesn't have to stop you. But understand that marriage means your decisions eventually affect another person's life too. That's not bad. That's what commitment means. But you should go into it understanding the responsibility. I also want you to understand something about yourself. You're a lot like me. You enjoy your space. You like thinking. You like information. You're goal-driven. You don't need constant stimulation or attention. That's something you need to understand about yourself before you make lifelong commitments. Don't allow social media to tell you what marriage is supposed to be. Don't let somebody else's definition of masculinity, femininity, relationships, or success dictate your life. Ask yourself what kind of life you want. Then ask whether the woman you're marrying genuinely wants to build that same life, not whether you can convince each other to become different people. And whatever you decide, don't give up the dream you've already started building. I spent years learning that lesson. I've been married 3 times, and I'm not telling you that so you'll make the decision I would make. I'm telling you because I finally understand how valuable time is. You can make more money. You can start another career. You can rebuild after failure. But you can't get your 20s back. So if you get married, build the marriage and build your dream at the same time. Don't abandon one for the other. And if you ever find yourself becoming somebody you don't recognize just to keep a relationship together, stop and think. The right relationship shouldn't require you to abandon the person you're becoming. I love you, I'm proud of you, and whatever you decide, I'm going to support you. I just want you to make the decision consciously, not because you're 22, not because everybody expects marriage to be the next step, and not because social media told you what your life should look like. I think that is the heart of what you're trying to say. You aren't really trying to tell your nephew not to marry. You're trying to tell him, don't accidentally trade your future for your present. And because you're his uncle, not his father, you have an advantage. You don't have to make the decision for him. You can simply give him the perspective of a man who has already traveled considerably farther down the road. Perhaps the greatest gift you can give him isn't an answer. It's a question he carries with him for the next 20 years. Is the life I'm building actually the life I want? If he can honestly answer that question throughout his 20s, whether he marries at 22 or 32, he'll be far better prepared than most people.